11 countries are now directly involved in active combat across the Middle East. Air defense stockpiles are draining by the hour, and the one assumption everyone built their security on, that American bases would keep them safe, is being shattered in real time. What's unfolding right now is something most analysts said would never happen, and the details coming out of American and European media paint a picture far more alarming than anything you're hearing on mainstream channels. So let's break it all down. Hit subscribe right now if you want the truth without the corporate filter. We cover what they won't every single day. Turn on notifications so you never miss when we expose the next major story. Do it now. The Washington Post published an analysis that honestly deserves more attention than it's getting. The writer used an analogy that cuts straight to the heart of what went wrong. Imagine a man who's been feuding with the owner of an apartment building. One day he kicks down the front door, drags the owner to the roof, and throws him off. He's convinced that once the owner is gone, the man's children will turn on each other, fighting over who gets to run the building. Problem solved, except that's not what happened. Instead of fighting each other, the owner's children stormed out of the building and started destroying the entire neighborhood. That analogy isn't just clever, it's disturbingly accurate. The assumption was that removing Iran's supreme leader would trigger an internal power struggle, maybe even a coup. The Revolutionary Guard would fracture. The regime would collapse from within. What actually happened is the exact opposite. The IRGC didn't fracture. They unified. And they didn't just hit back at the people who struck them. They unleashed on every target within reach. Israel, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, the UAE, Oman, the entire region became a battlefield overnight. According to Axios, 11 nations are now engaged in direct combat. Some have formally declared involvement, others haven't. But missiles don't care about official declarations. And that brings us to a critical military reality that most people don't understand. In modern warfare, the first 48 hours are everything. That's when you strike your high V-value targets, the ones you've spent years identifying, tracking, and cataloging through intelligence operations, command and control centers, missile depots, leadership bunkers, radar installations. You hit them fast and you hit them hard, because every hour that passes after those first 2 days, those targets start losing their value. Commanders relocate, weapons get moved to secondary sites, communication lines shift to backup systems. The intelligence you gathered over years becomes outdated in days. And here's the part that should concern everyone. Time isn't working against Iran. It's working against the coalition. Every day this conflict drags on, the targets that America and Israel mapped out become less and less relevant. Meanwhile, Iran's missile launchers are mobile. They're not sitting in fixed positions waiting to be bombed. The moment the war started, those platforms moved. So even if you had perfect intelligence about where a launcher was positioned last Tuesday, it's somewhere else entirely by now. That's a fundamental problem with no easy solution. Trump reportedly told Congress this would be a 48-hour operation. We're now past day 3, heading into day 4, and the strikes haven't stopped Iran from launching. Hours ago, Iran fired what's being identified as an intercontinental ballistic missile. It was intercepted, yes, but the fact that they launched one at all tells you everything about where this is heading. But here's something that's genuinely puzzling military analysts. America's opening strikes were supposed to destroy Iran's radar systems, suppress its air defenses, and obliterate its command and control infrastructure. Standard operating procedure. You blind the enemy first, then you dismantle them. So how is Iran still guiding missiles and drones with pinpoint accuracy? How are they hitting specific buildings, specific facilities, specific ports, all without functioning radar or centralized command? The answer appears to be China, and it's not speculation. Before this conflict even started, China was providing Iran with high-resolution satellite imagery showing the exact positions of American naval vessels, the movements of U.S. fighter jets as they landed at Israeli air bases, and the locations of air defense batteries across the region. When the U.S. quietly moved F-22 Raptors from Britain to a base in Israel, Chinese satellites captured it in detail and shared the intelligence with Tehran. Iran isn't operating blind. It has real-time eyes in the sky, just not its own. Chinese satellites are effectively serving as Iran's targeting system. Every drone, every missile that's landing with uncomfortable precision is being guided not just by Iranian GPS alternatives, but by live intelligence from Beijing. And this changes the entire strategic picture, because it means that degrading Iran's own infrastructure doesn't degrade its ability to fight. As long as China keeps watching and sharing, Iran keeps hitting. Now let's talk about the numbers that should keep every Gulf leader awake tonight. Bloomberg reported something that sent shockwaves through defense circles. Gulf air defense systems can sustain operations for approximately 4 days. 4 days. Now, some outlets are pushing back on that estimate. The New York Times and the Wall Street Journal have both raised questions about its accuracy, and the UAE has publicly denied it. But let's think through the math together, regardless of which estimate you trust. Take just 1 day's worth of combat. The UAE alone reportedly engaged over 900 incoming threats, a mix of missiles and drones in roughly 24 hours. Every single one of those was intercepted using premium air defense systems, primarily Patriot missiles. A single Patriot interceptor costs around $1 million. A single Iranian drone costs maybe $10,000. You're spending 100 times more to destroy each incoming threat than it cost your enemy to build it. And it gets worse. For every missile Iran launches, you typically need 2 to 3 interceptors to guarantee a kill. So if Iran has an estimated 3,000 missiles capable of reaching the Gulf, and that's a conservative middle estimate, you need somewhere around 9,000 interceptors just to deal with the missiles. That's not counting drones. Now consider that Lockheed Martin, the sole manufacturer of Patriot missiles, produces roughly 630 per year for the entire world. They've announced plans to increase production to 2,000 annually, but that's a future goal, not current reality. So where does the resupply come from? America itself has a shortage. Israel is already requesting replenishment. If Gulf states go to Washington asking for more interceptors, they're standing in line behind Israel, and America doesn't have enough for either of them. The Gulf built its entire security model on a simple premise: host American bases. Let the U.S. handle defense and focus on economic development, tourism, real estate, sovereign wealth funds, global investment. That was the plan. And for decades it worked. But this war is testing whether that model can survive a sustained assault. Every day Iran fires, it sends the same message to every Gulf capital. The Americans can't fully protect you. And no matter where you stand on the politics of this, that's a strategic reality that can't be ignored. Meanwhile, the political landscape in Washington is fracturing in ways that could directly impact how long this war lasts. Trump formally notified Congress that the U.S. is engaged in war, a move that gives him expanded authority to deploy weapon systems that haven't been used before, but it also opens a legal and political door that Democrats are racing to walk through. The Speaker of the House, one of Trump's strongest allies, made a statement that accidentally revealed more than intended. He essentially said the U.S. attacked Iran because Israel made the decision to strike first, and America had no choice but to follow. He tried to frame it as preventing chaos, but the damage was done. Democrats immediately seized on it, arguing that Trump is running an Israel first policy instead of America first, and that the Republican Party is being driven by external interests rather than national ones. They're now pushing for a formal vote on the war's legitimacy, and they plan to take concrete steps in the coming days to try to halt operations. Trump's response was blunt. He said he'll continue as long as the war demands it, but the pressure is building. 6 American service members have been confirmed dead. Images of downed U.S. aircraft in Kuwait surfaced online. These aren't just headlines. They're ammunition for congressional opponents who want to pull the plug. And then there's Britain. Keir Starmer stood before Parliament and invoked the lesson of Iraq. He said the UK would take a defensive-only posture, protecting British bases in Cyprus, but refusing to participate in offensive operations. He won't open British bases to U.S. forces. Trump publicly criticized him for it, saying he never expected to see Britain and America so far apart. Spain went even further. It expelled U.S. refueling tankers from its bases entirely, refusing to let its territory be used for strikes on Iran. 20 aerial refueling aircraft are now heading to the Middle East from U.S. soil, up from the original 15. The coalition of the willing is looking a lot less willing than Washington hoped. And now for the story that's being dramatically underreported. Tucker Carlson dropped 2 claims that deserve far more scrutiny. The first, Saudi Arabia and Qatar reportedly arrested Mossad operatives who were planning sabotage operations timed to coincide with the war against Iran. The second, and this is the one almost nobody focused on, Carlson warned that Israel could exploit the regional chaos to damage a Al-Aqsa mosque. The scenario he described is chillingly specific. An air defense missile gets launched to intercept an incoming threat. It fails to hit its target and instead comes back down directly onto the mosque compound. Israel then blames Iran, saying it was an Iranian missile that struck the site. It sounds outlandish until you remember that war creates perfect conditions for exactly this kind of operation. When every country in the region is tracking hundreds of projectiles simultaneously, who can definitively prove where one specific missile came from? The fog of war doesn't just obscure military movements, it obscures responsibility. And in a conflict where Iran denied hitting an Aramco facility in Saudi Arabia, claiming it was actually an Israeli false flag operation, the lines between reality and manipulation are already blurred beyond recognition. Whether you believe these claims or dismiss them, they're circulating at the highest levels of American media, and they're shaping how millions of people interpret this conflict. The economic aftershocks are already sending tremors through global markets. Brent crude has climbed to $85 per barrel. The Wall Street Journal's pre-war forecast was precise. They said if the Strait of Hormuz remained contested for a few days, expect $84. If it lasts a full week, prepare for $120 to $140 per barrel. We're tracking right along that prediction. Qatar has halted gas production and suspended all petrochemical and chemical manufacturing output. European gas prices surged 50% overnight in response. Saudi Aramco is reportedly studying alternative export routes, including a Red Sea pipeline to bypass Hormuz entirely, a move that would route oil through Egypt's Sumemed pipeline and the port of Jeddah. 8,000 people are stranded in transit at Doha's Hamad International Airport. Airlines across the Gulf have suspended or severely limited flights. Qatar Airways, Air Arabia, Jazer Airways, Gulf Air, Oman Air, all grounded or operating only emergency evacuation flights. The UAE's carriers are running limited outbound-only services to move stranded passengers out of the country. Asian workers in Gulf states are reportedly driving overland to Saudi Arabia to catch flights from Jeddah and Riyadh, the only airport still operating with relative normalcy. Gold paradoxically dipped slightly, not because the crisis is easing, but because Wall Street investors are liquidating gold holdings to cover losses in the stock market. It's a temporary mechanical move. Historically, gold rebounds hard once the initial market panic stabilizes. For now, it's sitting around $500 or $163 an ounce, down from its recent peak, but nobody expects it to stay there. And this is where the entire situation reaches its most dangerous inflection point. Iran is applying the Russia-Ukraine playbook, Absorb devastating losses, keep firing, and let time erode the enemy's coalition. It's counterintuitive to Western military thinking, which prioritizes swift, decisive victories using technological superiority. You bring your best weapons, overwhelm the enemy in 48 to 72 hours, and declare mission accomplished. But Iran isn't playing that game. It's absorbing hits to its command centers, its nuclear facilities, its presidential compound, even its state television headquarters, and it keeps launching. The IRGC's goods force released a statement saying they will keep the gates of fire open and will not rest until the enemy is defeated. They framed the elimination of the supreme leader as a crossing of every red line. And they're treating this as an existential, almost religious war with no room for surrender. Foreign Policy magazine published an analysis today arguing that killing leadership figures historically strengthens authoritarian regimes rather than weakening them. It creates martyrs. It unifies factions that were previously competing. It eliminates the possibility of negotiated outcomes because there's no longer a central authority willing to make concessions. The irony is devastating. The strike that was supposed to end the threat may have guaranteed that it continues indefinitely. The Cohen-Powell doctrine says you never go to war without exhausting every diplomatic option and without a clear exit strategy. By every measure, neither condition was met here. Diplomacy was still on the table. Steve Witkoff was literally negotiating with Iran's foreign minister in Geneva when the decision was made. And nobody has articulated what winning looks like or how this ends. Right now, the Gulf states are absorbing more punishment than Israel. They're in a war they didn't choose, triggered by a strike they didn't authorize against an enemy that's hitting them harder than the country that actually started the fight. If any Gulf nation formally declares war, Iran has explicitly threatened to target royal palaces, not military installations, not ports, not oil fields, but the residences of the ruling families themselves. That's the line that keeps every Gulf leader frozen in place. So here's where we stand. We're on day 4 of a conflict that was supposed to last 2 days. 11 countries are involved. Air defense stockpiles are depleting at rates nobody planned for. Iran is still launching despite unprecedented strikes on its territory. China is quietly feeding Thrawn the intelligence it needs to keep its weapons accurate. Washington is politically divided, London is sitting on the sidelines, and the Gulf states are caught in the worst possible position under sustained attack with no clear path to safety. The consequences of eliminating Iran's supreme leader turned out to be far greater than the prize itself. The building owner is gone, but his children aren't fighting over the building. They're burning down the entire block. Every hour this continues, the chances of a clean resolution shrink. And if any air defense system in the region fails, if any country's interceptor stockpile runs dry, the next phase of this conflict could escalate to a level that no one in this generation has ever witnessed. That's not fear-mongering, that's the math, and the math doesn't lie.